Oh my gosh, Clay! You guys have been begging for this all year, so guess what? It is time. So here's what you're going to need. You're going to need a little dish of water. You're going to need a paper towel holder. What? Yes, paper towel holder with piece of tape on the end. We will reuse these, so I will be able to take the tape off and put a new one on for the next kid. We are going to need a rectangular prism of clay. This is how I cut them this year. Maybe I'll change it up next year, but for right now, this is our rectangular prism, so it's a big, nice chunk of clay. You're going to need a butter knife and a fork. Yes, I said a fork. Like you eat with dinner? Yes, like you eat with dinner. So I'm going to put this off to the side for now. As a matter of fact, I'm also going to put my water and my other tools off to the side because on my clay board, which is what this is, it's a piece of plywood that Miss Marge bought for us, so thank you, Miss Marge. And I covered them with canvas because canvas is actually one of those things that most clay, unless it's really, really wet, won't stick to. So one thing that's nice about clay is it has this elasticity. That means it kind of stretches. So if you know, think about the elastic in your underwear, like that stretches, it's kind of stretchy. So you can actually pinch and pull and push and shove all around. The nice thing about clay is it moves a lot. It has some weight to it, so it's a little heavy. So I'm going to push it down just a little bit to get started. So this is probably about, I don't know, like an inch and a half thick or so, inch thick. And we need to get it to about the size of a pencil, so about that thick. So about a 1/4 inch or so, maybe a 1/2 inch probably is a little more likely. So what I'm going to have to do with this is I'm going to have to thin it out. Now there's a couple of ways we could do that. We could put it in a slab roller. We don't have one of those. You could take a rolling pin. That's a big pain in the butt. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to let gravity work for us. So we're going to basically throw the clay into a thin slab. Now that doesn't mean throw it across the room. If you throw it across the room, you're going to be in big, big trouble, guys. Please don't do that. What we're going to do is we're going to use this to our advantage. So what I'm going to do, and I'll show you on my hands first. I'm going to take this clay in my hands kind of like this, and I'm actually going to throw it sideways. So when I throw this down on the board, I'm not going to slam it down straight. That's going to do nothing. I'm going to throw it a little bit at an angle. So I'm going to come this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it. So it doesn't stretch very much at first, but when I throw it this way and throw it down at a slight angle, it's going to stretch a little bit this way. So every time I throw it and pick it up, I'm going to turn it a little bit, and I'm going to let it stretch in different ways. Now, if you could have seen this before, if you saw a piece of it, you can see, oh my gosh, it's getting a little bit bigger now. So I'm going to keep flipping. I'm going to flip it over to the back side now. Make sure it's nice and even. So I'm turning it, picking it up, throwing it. Turning it, picking it up, throwing it. Turning it, picking it up, throwing it. And I'm going to flip it over once or twice so it lands on a different side. But I am stretching it out is basically, so I can see that this is really like wide here. So I have, it's still not quite thin enough for my taste. So I'm going to do it one more time, a couple more times. I want it to stretch this way. So I'm going to throw it this way. Because whichever end, if I want this end to stretch, then this end needs to come right over front. So this end's going to go this way and it stretches that way. So I see that I need, it's nice and thin this way, but it's got to get, I want it to stretch this way. I want a nice even spot. I'm looking for kind of a rectangle. Now I'm looking at this as getting a little thin. I don't want to go too much thinner. So I have this nice piece right here. So if you take a look at it, oh my gosh, it starts to get thinner. So you're going to have this nice thin piece. So this is the first part. This is where your knife comes in. Now I haven't decided yet if I'm going to give you guys a template or not. So just in case I decide not to, I'm going to show you without. So I'm going to trim up a nice square. Let me try and make it as even as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're not doing perfect. What we're doing is we're doing little clay animals. So these are going to be propped up, so they will stand up eventually. But what I'm going to do is I'm even going to trace this out just in case I make a mistake. I'm going to trace a U shape here, and whoops, too thin. See, that's why we make those marks first. So I'm just going to erase that as much best I can. So let's see. I think that's way too thin in the middle. So maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll find the middle, and then I'll come down this way. That looks much better. Much, much better. Okay. So I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to cut around that U shape. So here's what I'm doing. I am basically making an animal that looks flat. So if you looked at it from above, it's kind of like your pet at home's laying on the rug all sprawled out. So this is like the front leg and the back leg and the front leg and the back leg. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to attach everything that I want to make on this first. So I'm going to make, let's make a little kitty cat because I have the example of that kitty cat done. So very first thing, I'm going to trim the feet so they're nice and even. Let's see. Maybe he's a little lopsided. Don't trim too much. If you're not sure, ask me and I'll trim him for you. Don't keep trimming and trimming and trimming until he has no feet left because that wouldn't be good. So I have all this scrap clay that I'm going to smush together. Alright, so I need to make a head for him. So here's what I'm going to do. First I'm going to take my finger and get rid of all these sharp edges. If you leave those sharp edges and they get baked in the kiln, not baked, but fired, that's a new word for you guys. If they get fired in the kiln, then you're going to have a problem because they are going to stay that sharp. So they will go from a very soft corner that happens to have a hard edge to it to a very hard corner, and that's not going to go anywhere. So that edge will always look like that. It will always be sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger right now and I'm going to smooth that down a little bit. Now I can, if it has some blemishes, that means imperfections, I can actually take my finger and erase those little marks that I don't like. Don't press too hard. Remember, you're just pulling clay. You're not actually trying to flatten it. You're just pulling it to another area. So you're basically smooshing it. So I'm smooshing it across the surface of that. All right. So what I have to do is I'm going to make a head. So very first thing we obviously know is to make a round head. Now, when you're picking your animal, please remember that this clay, if I took a thin wedge of this clay, it flops. It doesn't have much strength to it yet because it's very wet. So like if you made a giraffe head, you'd have to make that neck very short. And it would kind of look like a spotted horse at that point because it's not really going to look like a giraffe without a neck. So giraffe might not be a good pick. So you might want to think about things like elephants or bears or cats and dogs, anything that you want to make. Just please make sure that you're thinking ahead about, does this thing have any narrow parts? Is it going to have a narrow neck, a long narrow neck like a flamingo? Probably not a great thing because our flamingos, A, don't have a short neck, and B, they're two-feeted and not four-footed. So please make sure that you're picking an animal that's kind of four-footed and a little bit shorter in the neck because that's just easier that way. So it should be down on all fours. All right, so I have my ball. I have my little letter I here. So what I'm going to do, I need to attach these. So if I take a piece of clay and I tried just to push them together, if I tried to just get that seam to work, what's going to happen is when the clay dries, some of that water, there we go, we can see it on camera, some of that water is going to evaporate, and when that water evaporates and goes somewhere else, that actually takes all of the water in here and it goes elsewhere. So there's not enough water in here to keep it the same size. It's going to shrink. So when they shrink, they have a habit of, in those seams, to pull apart because they're not really connected. They're just laid in there. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to attach them. We don't have glue. Glue, A, isn't going to work because it's going to burn up in the kiln, and B, it's not going to stick anyway, so it's going to be useless to you. So you have to figure out a technique to attach this. What's that technique going to be? Well, it's something called slipping and scoring, and I don't mean like football score, yay, we got a point kind of scoring. I mean scoring, the other definition of scoring, which you may not know yet. Scoring, other than gaining something, if you score something, you gain something. Scoring also means to scratch. So what we're going to do is we're going to score lines into where we're going to attach this. So if scoring means to scratch, you probably already guessed what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to scratch it. What it's going to do is it's going to rough up the surface. So it's going to make it kind of like pointed. And what it's going to do is if I do that on both sides of where it's going to attach, so wherever it's going to stick, anything that sticks together has to be scored. It's going to take those two rough surfaces and make something like this that fits together like a puzzle piece. So these things and these things will kind of mush together a little bit. I need to help that along though because it's not just going to mush all by itself. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a little bit of water on it. Please do not dip. No, don't do that. Don't dip it because that's too much. You just want just enough to get a little bit of water in there. It'll soften the clay up and it'll kind of make it mushy. It'll make it a lot easier to squish. So I'm going to put it down nice and firm, making sure it sticks well, and when it dries, it should not pull apart now because it's attached really well. All right, so I have the head on. Now the other thing that poses a problem sometimes is a tail, because a kitty cat has a long, narrow tail. So if I tried to put something that was this big on it and tried to get it to stand up, it is not going to do that. It's going to fall over, and it's going to kind of fall off, and it's not going to help. Plus, the longer it is, the more likely it is to break off, so I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is I want to make a shorter little tiny version of it that looks convincing, or I need to think about, how can I adjust this the way it is? And what I'm going to do is, instead of putting my kitty cat tail straight up in the air like most people would want to do, I'm going to actually take it and I'm going to wrap it around so it looks like the kitty has his tail curled around him. I can even put it off a little bit too. I don't have to have everything right on top of things. I can actually hang it off just a tiny little bit too. So I think I'm going to do that, because on my last one I actually wrapped it around very close. So on this one I think I'm going to have it pop off a little bit. So it looks like it's going to attach here first, so I have to slip and score there too. So the slip part comes with the water. Slip is actually a clay term, and slip in clay means watered down clay. So it's clay that's kind of like, it's watered down enough almost to be like paint. It's very, very thin, very watered down, and it's one of those things that is very easy to figure out how to make it, because you just keep mixing water in until it gets goopy. So I'm going to take my finger and I'm actually going to smooth this down. I'm not only just going to push on this one, I'm going to smooth it down so it looks like it's just one piece. So actually when I'm all done with it, you see that the seam has disappeared, the crack where that attaches. I can actually push that down so that it looks like it's part of the piece, like it was all one piece. And then I'm going to take this and make sure, like, if there's any tiny little cracks that I don't want, I'm smoothing those out with my finger, because whatever cracks are left on there to dry are going to be permanent. So I think what I'll do is I'll have him curl like this. So I'm going to pinch it there. I think, let's see, looks like it goes right here. So I'm just going to do just enough to get that area. I don't want to hack up his whole leg, because if I hack up his whole leg, it's going to be very hard to smooth out again. It's nice and neat practice if I just do what I need instead of everything, every little bitty thing between here and there. Alright, so if I press that down, it's just going to press down in that area. If it's a little bit extra, you can always take your finger and smooth it out. That's fine. Oops, I'm cracking at the tail. Alright, I'm going to push that together, and hopefully that won't crack again. If it does crack again, I can always either just pull it off, or I can slip and score that crack too, and that will actually attach it. Alright, so that's going to be a little delicate, but it's not going to be as delicate as if I put it straight up in the air. Alright, so if I was going to do ears, maybe I'll use this. I'm going to pinch it into an ear shape, so maybe a triangle. Nice flat triangle here. Try and make two of them, so like a raindrop kind of a thing to make that work. Push and pull, push and pull. Actually, I kind of like that wrinkle in there. Maybe I'll put that back in. All right, so Sunday, Monday, happy days. Guess what? It's time to clean up. Good thing I don't have a class right now. All right, so I'm going to slip and score this too. Just a little bit. I don't have to go crazy with this. Slip and score where I want my ear to go. And that's not going to work. It was a thought. All right, so I'm going to push that ear in, make sure it's nice and snug. I can even take this and smooth it out a little bit, but I want to make sure that it's pressed in nice and firm. I don't want to lose that ear if I can help it, so the better I can put that on, the better it's going to hang out and stay there. Alright, so same thing here. Got to slip and score. Maybe I'll just do, since it's so tiny, maybe I'll just do that. Oops. Get it together this extent. Slip and score both sides. Alright, there we go. Push that in. All right, now you're going to ask me, well, Miss Eckstein, these looking a little flat there. What are we going to do about that? Are we going to fix that? Yes, we're going to fix that. That's what the paper towel roll comes in for. So once you are all done building your stuff, don't do this before you're done, because if you do this before you're done, chances are you're going to collapse him, and we don't want to do that. Because what we want is we want him to stand up. So very carefully, you're going to put your hand underneath, support him the whole way, just like a little baby. You're going to put him on top of the tube. And if we need to, I will find a way to support him. And you're gently, gently going to wrap him around so that he's hugging the tube. Don't make his legs too short. That's why I said don't make his legs too short. Now, I will find a way. I have ways to prop these up. I might even cut them in half. We'll see. But right now, what he's doing is he's hugging that little thing so that when he dries and he's leather hard, which is the next stage. This is wet clay right now. When he's leather hard, he'll actually stand up on his own. So this one's been drying for a little bit. So you can see I did the tail a little differently on this one. But he will actually stand up all on his own. He has no problem with that now because he's dried out for a little while. And he will actually stand all on his own and stand up on the desk. So that's going to be the key. Now you're going to write your name here on the tape. So I'm going to write Miss E. Miss Eckstein. There we go. Miss E, and then we'll let him dry a little bit. When he's ready, I'll pop him off. I'll carve your name in the bottom so that we don't lose him, or your initials at least. So if you want your initials on there, that's fine. Just make sure that I know which one is which, because these are all going to get mixed up all together in the kiln, and there's no way to keep them straight once they're in there. So please, please, please make sure you are putting your names on it, keeping them straight. If he's not going to behave himself, if he's going to keep tipping and sliding, come ask me. I might have a way to prop him up. If I haven't cut the tubes in half already, then we'll see how it goes. I might just cut the tubes in half and be done with that. This extra clay comes back to me so we can reuse it, and then you are all finished. That's all there is to it. So you can build whatever kind of animals you want. That's fine by me. Please just make sure that you are taking your time and getting those connections nice and strong so they don't pop out. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Make sure you look back at this video and look up at the screen so that you know what's going on. We'll see you guys later. Hopefully we'll have some really cute animals.